We lost a lot.
What happens when a community loses its way? When an entire state has its collective heart broken?
This will always be a part of Lewiston now.
Yeah. What a history, huh? It's one that we could have done without, though.
Leroy Walker walks these days with a certain weight on his shoulders,
It's hard.
carrying with him the loss of his son Joseph.
You don't ever wish this on your enemy if you have one. It's just too much to cope with day in and day out.
Joseph Walker was gunned down during last month's mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine. He was with some friends at Schmenge's Bar and Grill when a gunman opened fire here and at a bowling alley. The 57-year-old's life was among the 18 lives lost that night.
You know, as time passes, how does this, continue to be a part of here?
It's actually, we think it's passing time, but it gets worse. The loneliness and not being able to have my son, it's worse now than it was the first few days.
A month later, the media is mostly gone. Cameras have turned away, but Leroy Walker soldiers on.
I have a hard time to actually feel like we're in an election. It's hard.
Walker has spent 14 years as a city councilor in nearby Auburn, but this was his first election without his son.
I'm so sorry for the great loss.
Oh, it's been hard.
Dutifully, he stood on a recent Tuesday morning, accepting hugs and words of comfort.
I'm so sorry.
Oh boy, hasn't it been an awful one, huh?
No talk of votes or politics. As he greeted his constituents and friends, many of them were grieving much the same way he was.
I understand.
Know that we are here, and if you need to talk, come on over.
For as much as everyone here wishes they could change the way things are, this moment will always be woven into the history of Lewiston.
This is a big part of our history now.
Which is why Rachel Ferrante with the Maine Museum of Innovation, Learning, and Labor has enlisted the help of local artists to collect items left behind in memory of the victims. Crosses, pictures, posters, all are now being gathered and displayed here, away from the elements where the community can come to reflect this winter.
I think it shows you the resilience and the character and the spirit of this incredible community.
There is one part of this community perhaps hit harder than most by this tragedy. 4 of the victims were deaf.
This is something that hasn't just impacted the small community of Lewiston and Auburn, but people statewide, people nationally, and people globally.
Through an interpreter, Reagan Thibodeau described for us what the last few weeks have been like for the deaf community in Maine.
We've never experienced this before. Never in America, in general, having the deaf community impacted and the amount of people that have passed who are deaf, who were murdered, who were deaf, is unprecedented.
This community is now among this growing list of communities that have experienced this awful trauma. And it doesn't seem to stop.
No, it sure doesn't.
Mainers typically pride themselves on their toughness. These days, though, it's taken every bit of that strength to move forward.
We don't know why, the good Lord's the only one that can answer that.
Chris Conti, Scripps News, Lewiston, Maine.